Good morning, everyone. My name is Hamed Ekhtiari, and I'm delighted here to be with you. We have a nice series of speakers. We have 12 speakers today in the second webinar that we are organizing on dose response in non-invasive brain stimulation. And hopefully that would be an interesting and intriguing discussion that we are going to have on how actually non-invasive brain stimulation work. Just to give you a little bit of context in the first few minutes of the meeting, when we talk about international network of neuromodulation, neuroimaging, what we are talking about, we started the discussion with a group of colleagues and collaborators on the importance of virtual collaboration, diversity, global representativeness, transparency, harmonization, and methodological rigor. And we established what we call International TSFMRI Network, or INTF, with members from something like 54 different labs around the world, and a group of colleagues that we are working together to run different activities within that network. We already have a YouTube channel which is active. In the chat space, you can find a link to the YouTube channel. And also we work on different sort of joint projects. We recently published a checklist on concurrent TSFMRI studies in Nature Protocols, which is already available online. So you can find that as something like a joint activity that we have in the consortium. But we realize there are lots of potentials beyond TSFMRI in other areas of neuromodulation, neuroimaging. So we are extending the activities to other areas of cross sections between neuroimaging, neuromodulation, and we are hopeful to be able to push that agenda forward. Within that network, we already have a WhatsApp group. So if you are interested, you can just scan the QR code and join the WhatsApp group that we have. Just bring your phone and just scan the QR codes. We are planning for some symposiums and activities in the OHBM meeting in Montreal. So those who are interested, we definitely would be happy to include you in those activities. We are discussing with a group of colleagues. Danny Wang is the champion on that, discussing with different people in terms of making a study group within the ISMRM community. We are also discussing with OHBM in terms of developing a special interest group. And also we are going to have some activities in besides the brain stimulation conference. So we are going to have some social events there. So if you are interested, you can just join us on those activities that we are going to have. The webinar today, I will have my co-chair, Dr. Daria Antonenko from Germany. Daria, do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
It's great to have Daria here. So Daria and I will try to basically make sure that the timing of the meeting would be kind of managed in the best possible way. And meanwhile, Daria would make sure that every question that we have that you are posting in the chat space will be asked from the speaker. So we will try to keep things together, and hopefully that could be done on time. And I just have a kind of small sort of opening talk to kind of open the discussions, and then we will have presentations from other speakers. And I have just only one single slide. When we talk about dose response relationship in non-invasive brain stimulation studies, there are different factors that we are discussing about. First of all, we discuss about dose. And when we talk about dose, we talk about delivered dose and what are the parameters that we have in reporting delivered dose. What are the parameters that we need to report when we have an intervention to make the intervention fully reproducible? What are the safety parameters that we need to take into account? And what are the minimum requirements of a study to be able to call it a dose response non-invasive brain stimulation study, as we have similar studies in pharmacology to have different doses and then kind of exploring how the response would be causally related to changes in dose. And that would be something interesting to discuss more during the webinar. And then we have another factor which is called the received dose inside the brain. And there are challenges in terms of, okay, how to report the received dose. What are the recommendations in terms of measuring, how to measure received dose inside the brain? Whether we are recording that or we estimate the dose that we receive inside the brain. And then what are the levels that we can measure that? We can measure that in the neural level. We can measure that in the kind of individual level. We can measure that in the group level, in multiple different levels, and we'll discuss about that through the webinar. The other issue that we have when we talk about dose response is about what we have for response in terms of what are the parameters that we have for response and how response could or should be measured. And then when we talk about dose, can we define dose in other levels? For example, dose in the task that we provide for people. And also talking about the contextual factors that would shape the response, and also the baseline brain function that we have and how baseline brain function should be considered in dose response relationship in non-invasive brain stimulation. And then at the end, we basically need to integrate those levels together in what we call dose response function. And we had questions even from the previous webinar in terms of how the kind of the function should look like. And based on the level of evidence, do we have a linear function, or what are the other types of functions that we might have in relationship between dose and response? And then how we can compute that, and what are the kind of the levels of computation that we can consider. And then when we have the dose response relationship and having an idea about the function, how we can use that function in terms of target engagement, biomarker development, dose optimization, how we can go beyond those activities. So that is kind of the basic framework that we have been discussing during the previous webinar, and we are going to extend those questions in this webinar this week, and then hopefully we'll continue discussions through the chat space that we already have here, and also we'll kind of move forward with some joint activities that we'll discuss about after the talks that we have. Now we have 4 speakers that they are going to give us brief talks about different dimensions of those response relationship. Each talk would be 10 minutes. And you can use the chat space to post your question anytime during the talk. So please, if you have any comment, any suggestions, any question, even if you have answers to questions that are being posted in the chat space, please actively contribute to that. And my colleagues will also post some kind of links related to the talks that we have here. Hopefully everything goes well and we'll have a nice discussion within the chat space. And then at the end, we'll have time for further discussion.